or internet rather. Okay, we got that. All right, folks are slowly coming in. I'm sorry. Apologies again, everyone. Maybe we can just go off agenda while we wait for the approval of the minutes. Is that allowed? Because I know we promised the folks from the Department of Education that we weren't going to be on extremely long. We would, be able to get them in and out. So
the only thing you can't do is you can't take votes.
Okay, so maybe we can just go ahead and hear from the representative from the Department of Education. Is that okay with everyone? All righty.
All right, would you like us to go, Ms. Womack?
Yes, that would be great because I know you all are on a time frame and we don't want to keep you all longer than we promised.
Yes, ma'am. So my name is Ethan Malosa. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Louisiana Department of Education. I also have with me our Deputy Superintendent, Beth Ciano, who is also on the call. And we're here to provide an update on the data that we can share regarding HCR 15. That's data that we have collected at the department through other means. That way we can report out to you. So I'm going to let Beth go ahead and take over and discuss what we can collect, what we have, and what we can report out to you. And then we can discuss if there's further information that you need that we cannot provide, the best avenues to be able to receive that data. That way you can complete your report. So I'm going to turn it over to Beth here, and then y'all can ask her questions about the types of data that you're really wanting and kind of where we want to go with the data collection.
All right, thank you, Ethan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beth Ciano. I am the Deputy Superintendent over Finance for the Department of Education. And one of my roles is to oversee the financial data collection for all of the school systems. Here at the department, we have an annual submission, an official data collection where each of the school systems and charter schools supply their end of the year actual information to the department. And this information is required for several reports that the department prepares. It's guided, the data collection is guided by an accounting guide, which we publish through the Bessie admin code. That guide outlines all of the different codes by which school systems are asked to submit information. For instance, different types of salaries across their expenses. It includes contract information, it includes benefits, all types, well over hundreds of different types, as you can imagine. In any accounting system, transactions are recorded and reported to us that way. It is actuals at the end of the year, so we collect that information this time of the year. Right now, we're working with the systems on the 2021 financial report. And we do have several, years back. We have 1920 and we have 1819, which was some of the information that you had originally requested from the agency. We don't have every imaginable transaction in there. We do, again, have hundreds of different ones based on prior data requests, based on requirements that we have to meet, whether it be for federal or state reporting, but we do have quite a few. And in looking at the request that was sent to the department to assist with the data collection, we did examine each one of the data points that you were looking for, and I can give you a rundown of what we do and what we do not have. So we do have, one thing that was asked for was school counselor information. We do have a specific accounting code that actually identifies salaries for school counselors. And And that would be across all the entities if they had such expenditures. We also have guidance counselors. That is one thing that we have specifically had a code for a number of years. And we can identify how much is being spent on the guidance counselors. Another one is school nurses. We have school nurses that has been in play for probably the last 15 years, just like the other two, where we know how much they're spending on their school nurses on an annual basis. We also have a code that falls under a function or a group of expenditures that we refer to as therapists, specialists, and counselors. One request you had was for mental health professionals. And we, according to our accounting guide, would group those mental health professionals who could be therapists or specialists or counselors to assist the students under the health services category. We do have information on that as well. Those three seem, or four seem to align very directly with your request. What we are not as clear about and are having some difficulty aligning your request, there are two areas. One is a truancy officer. Now, in our accounting guide, that particular category could be under our attendance and social work services. And we do have a category that does record salaries there. That would be for our, what we call, our terminology is child welfare and attendance coordinators or managers, things like that. And they are the individuals that the school systems actually employ when a child is no longer there, say at getting close to that 10 days of absences that are detrimental to their attendance at school. Those are the ones we refer to as child welfare and attendance. So some clarification with regards to that would be helpful for the department, because we may actually have some expense information regarding that particular category.
Okay.
The others that I'm having more difficulties matching and could use some additional information on is, for example, other health professionals not related to services provided through IEPs. We don't have anything in our group of expenditures or definitions in our accounting guide that I could match that to. So perhaps some clarification could help me look a little bit deeper into that data for you. That could be similar to the mental health professionals that I've already mentioned that we have numbers on. But again, that one is just a little bit needing a little more clarification. Also, the school resource officers. Now, we don't have anything in the accounting guide that refers to school resource officers. So I don't know what you're really imagining there. We do know that in what we call, as defined in our accounting guide, as safety and security, that we do have monies reported there as expenses, but it is lumped together with their security staff and their crossing guards. That is one category according to our accounting guide. So again, maybe we could talk a little bit more about what you're imagining there, and I can pull that apart for you, you know, at a later time and try to see whether or not we have anything you'd be interested in. We don't have anything in the accounting guide with regards to law enforcement contracts. We do have many categories of contracts, but we have not had a need to add anything or actually break out that particular dollar amount for any reason in the past, so we don't collect that information. And then also law enforcement personnel. As I mentioned, we have that security and safety category, but we don't have an accounting particular expense category referred to as law enforcement personnel. So for those things like there, again, if I can get maybe some clarifications today or at a later date, we could dig a little more deeply. The ones that I was having the most difficulties advancing, you know, or matching with your data request. So I'll stop right there and see what questions you might have for me.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would have to really confer with the entity that brought forth this concurrent resolution. But I think, thank you again for the information. And as much as you can provide the information that you just spoke about and perhaps give your definition of what it is that you mean, that would probably be helpful for us to be able to look through. The school resource officers would be what the school system would defines as a school resource officers. And I could send you that information as well. I think the security guard would probably be very close to that. If anyone in the room wants to send a little bit more clarification in the chat, that would be great. But I think as much as you can align and send what you have, I think that would be great. I've had some email exchanges with Mr. Melanson, and I think he made some suggestions that would be great as well, to possibly like do surveys or something with the various school districts that might be able to help us gather all of the information to fulfill the requirements. But I will double check and as soon as possible send you more information in regards to like what law enforcement contracts mean and being more specific. But whatever information, the information that you just stated, if you could send that to us and define it for us, like how you all define it, I think would be really, really helpful as well.
And one question I had, and we can certainly do that, let me just ask for one clarifying question. So we have, what I'm referring to is their actual expenditures. And sometimes maybe that's not what individuals ask us for in a data request. Perhaps they just need an about number. We do have some information that is budgeted. We have a different system that collects some statistics on numbers of personnel and their budgeted salary. It is not intended to align with their audited financials, which is the data that we actually receive through our financial system. But would you be interested in any of that information as well? I wasn't sure what it was to really look at. When you say expenditures, to me, I'm very technical, so it would be actual expenditures. But if there was some just information you might want for perspective, would that be of any interest to you for some? Because when I have my financial information, won't give you like staffing numbers. It will give you dollars, but it won't give you staffing numbers.
Okay, I think all details that you could provide, expenditures and budgets would be a great start. And like budgets versus actuals would be amazing.
Yeah, and that's what we want. And we don't do that at the department. We have very limited authority over the budgeting processes of the school systems. So we do ask from other reasons, like to calculate the pay raise that are appropriated by the legislature. We ask for staffing information, but it does not require a comparison of budget to actual. So we have to be very careful that that data does not intersect. But for a perspective, you could, you could look at that just in categories, particularly where we don't match exactly. It may give you some information. Oftentimes, if there is a expenditure that we don't collect, for example, during the legislative session, when we have to assist with fiscal notes, we will contact, as Ethan mentioned, the Superintendent's Association and/or the School Association, and they oftentimes can facilitate what is more of a survey to get some information. So that could be on some of these things that we have misalignment on. Could be a good path to move towards getting some additional data. Would Excel, would you prefer this information that I provide in Excel so someone can do some analysis? What are your needs with regards to that?
I think Excel would be great. And I'm wondering, does it also, would the budget and stuff include all the information? So like, for instance, I was just recently at a OJJDP meeting where various school districts were applying for grants for SROs. Would it include that information as well?
I'm not
Like
sure. Yeah, I don't know what an SRO is, so.
It's a school resource officer.
Oh, we don't, I checked yesterday in our staffing data and we don't have anything called a school resource officer in there. It is aligned with our accounting guide. So it is, we just don't have anything at the state level that's called a school resource officer. So
A lot of time, not to interrupt Beth, but a lot of times SRO officers are actually partnerships with local sheriff's agencies. So that may be something that's housed at the local district level, if I'm correct, Beth, that you may have to work with the school board association or the superintendent association just to get that information. And I do want to just kind of caution everyone towards survey data. While it's good to get a number about where we're at, to make hard decisions legislatively or recommendations, it's always good to have hard data that we can actually collect. So by requesting that from school districts or public records requesting it from local school districts is probably your best option if you want the hard data of what's happening, because survey data is like, it's optional. They don't have to give it to you if they don't want to. And we just want, as the department, to protect the integrity of our data collection that we have. So you won't see us often putting out large amounts of survey data, because we want to make sure what we're giving the legislature and the commission and all of our different agencies is actually hard proven data that we have from our systems that we are allowed to collect.
Gotcha. It's interesting. And may I ask another question? I think it's interesting that local schools, districts may be requesting funding and actually hiring or partnering with the law enforcement around the school resource officers, and that LDOE is only have like line items for security guards. Is there like, would you all know like what's the difference, or why would some schools partner with police officers and you all only have a category for security guards? I don't know if I'm asking that question correctly or articulating it very well, but it would seem like if Department of Education does not have it in a budget, I mean, is that a value for schools to then utilize police over normal security guards?
I think that's just a reporting code is what Beth is talking about, that it lumps it into one when they report it to the department. I don't think that's like they don't have the authority to do it, because the local district spends their money in the ways that they see necessary. And Beth, I'm sure you have more to say on this matter, but what I'm saying is you just have to be careful, because just because we have a code to collect the data for some other reporting we have to do doesn't mean that necessarily that's the spending authority that they would have. So Beth.
Well, and school resource officers, my experience with that is that they are not technically employees of the school system, which means the funds to pay them does not run through their books. So we, as an agency, to meet our requirements of state and federal reporting, we only ask them for what the funds that run through their actual accounting systems and for which they have full authority. That would mean it would be on the books of the sheriff's department or the other local law enforcement, and they would just have like some sort of agreement to actually have that individual on campus. So I think that's where maybe that could be the case in a lot of school systems where the money does not flow through them. It may be those local law enforcement agencies who actually get that money directly from local government funds or from some federal grant or something, and they employ them. So that's why the department would not necessarily have what we would have if they were called security or safety officers. They would be on the books of the school systems because they are employees of the school system.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions around that? So I think, yes, sending what you have in the Excel would be great. And then we can comb through it and then ask for additional information and try to figure out to match up everything as per the resolution. Okay, that'd be great.
In Excel, and I will send you system by system. Are you looking for mainly the 60 plus traditional city parish school systems? Are you looking for some of our independent charter schools as well?
Every school district, independent, yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that.
No problem. And for those that I'm a little unsure of, I will send before we go through and pull data for those, because we're guessing. I'll write something up and send that to you first, if that would be okay. For those other categories, just maybe get a little clarification before we go through all the work to pull the data and prepare it. Is that sufficient?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you all's support in trying to help get this information as we try to do our due diligence to comply with the resolution. I have to go back to the source as well, because it's not something that I was requesting. It came from other entities. So we're just trying to fulfill our duties and making sure that we can put together the report as per request. So glad Representative Duplessis has been able to join so he can take over from here. We just talked about the resolution. We couldn't call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum now, and go back to approving the minutes.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you for leading us in that important conversation. I want to apologize to everyone for being tardy. Just had some back-to-back conflicts that prevented me from joining at 1 o'clock, but I do appreciate Gina's leadership throughout this process. I will start us where we would have started. I don't know that we need to do roll call again, but is Nate on? Is he who's or Dr. Nagatu? Okay, hey Nate.
Yes, sir.
You know, if we have a quorum, let's go ahead and take up the minutes from last meeting and get those adopted.
I will move to approve those minutes.
Right. Motion by Mr. Pittman. Is there a second? I'll second, if that's appropriate. And we'll go ahead and adopt those minutes. We've already discussed the HRC 15. I was able to hear the last portion of the conversation. But we had some communication prior to today's meeting, and I want to thank LDOE, Messinio, and Ethan Melanson for your willingness to assist us in this effort. This was a resolution by Representative Hughes, who's asked this commission to oversee that collection, but we have to work collaboratively with the different entities, and we do acknowledge the challenges of trying to work with a decentralized school system in certain parts of the state, or working with law enforcement just to try to pull that data together. But we appreciate your willingness and cooperativeness in this endeavor. So just wanted to just thank you all for that, because that's some very important information. And next, as we move on to the next agenda item, we have a similar topic as it relates to the issue of education, but it's more along the lines of OJJ. And at this time, we have not submitted any formal requests to OJJ, but we can discuss what we would like to send to OJJ, which is basically a set of questions related to their policies and working with different schools around how they deal with responses involving our young people and that whole coordinated effort. So I would, Gina, if you wouldn't mind, allow you just to provide a brief summary there. And what I want to do is give OJJ, I want to kind of go through some of the questions we intend on sending them. I don't expect OJJ at this moment to have answers for these questions because we have not provided them to them, but I just want to just talk about it more generally, have a brief conversation about it, and then we will send them the formal questions in hopes that we can get some answers at a future date. But Gina, are you able to just maybe provide just a little backdrop? You there? I think you're on mute. You're still on mute.
Sorry, okay. I'm sharing my screen. I was double checking with Richard to make sure I was doing this correctly. And it's only that one document. Is that all you can see?
But I couldn't hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just, yeah, so I'm doing that right.
And again, I just want to mention, these are questions that we intend to ask OJJ as it relates to their coordination with the schools. So we don't expect there to be answers. If they have answers right now, we would certainly love to have that conversation, but these are questions that we intend to send to OJJ.
Yes.
It still
and-
looks like you're sharing your screen, but as long as you don't put something on your screen you don't want us to see, it should be all right.
Okay, that's good. I'm just doing the recommendations for OJJ. Just some of the questions. So from my understanding from some of the families and young people, they're concerned about the lack of education, especially specifically, I guess, around the special education. And so we compiled several questions, and as per Representative Duplessis, we don't expect at this moment that you'll have all the answers, but these are the questions. Can everyone see them? And Representative, I don't know if you just wanted to go through them separately, but they're here on the screen.
I'm happy to do that. We want to get to what specific, and I'm just reading what everybody can see, obviously, but what steps OJJ has taken to cooperate with LD on intervention and school improvement plans that'll help OJJ improve its school performance scores. Okay, how will OJJ ensure that the students it educates in secure care receive sufficient credits? We've heard some concerns brought to us by the community about this issue. So we want to see where OJJ is on that piece around earning sufficient credits and how we can support in that effort. Does OJJ have a transition coordinator or someone else on staff who's responsible for providing support when these kids re-enter community schools? And how do those employees work with students and families? Also, does OJJ provide an aggregate data regarding school discipline? You know, this whole piece around data is very critical, just like we were just talking with the representatives from Department of Ed. If not, what steps is OJJ taking to work with LD, Department of Ed, to ensure that there is an alternative method of data collection? And what facilities are operated by OJJ that are not currently providing educational services to children in OJJ's custody? And if they're not, what's the plan to ensure that they do as soon as possible? And lastly, has OJJ submitted an application to the Department of Education to go after some of the federal money to provide students with additional resources? We know that money is being allocated to provide for loss of learning throughout the state. That's been a big issue. We want to make sure that just like students who are not in secure care, they've had loss of learning, is OJJ also going to be trying to take advantage of some of that federal money as well? So that's really what we're going to be trying to talk to OJJ about. I know there are some representatives on here. I think I saw Deputy Secretary Summers. We appreciate you joining. And again, we do intend to send this in a formal letter in hopes that we can have in-depth discussion in the future. But I see Mr. Pittman has his hand up, so go ahead, sir.
I think our set of questions should include some specific objective questions, particularly about staffing. You know, list out the facility and what educational staff there is there. Maybe not by name, because I don't know if that would be appropriate, but by credentials, perhaps. And also, we should be sure to ask about not just the facilities that OJJ runs, but facilities for which they have contracts. Like the group homes, I know they don't generally run group homes. But more than half of the kids in OJJ custody are in group homes. We should include those questions in there.
I agree. Great points, and they will be included. Does anyone have any thoughts or any additional thoughts as it relates to these questions that we plan to provide OJJ? Any other questions? Again, we had actually talked about sending these prior to this meeting, we just didn't get around to it, to be just completely honest. But what we'd like to do is, we don't have the expectation today that OJJ can provide all that data, but we want to just give them the opportunity to have those answers after we formally submit them in the form of a letter. We're going to include the questions that Mr. Pittman suggested that we include. So, Mr. Summer, you have any thoughts initially with what we already talked about?
No, Representative Fuss, I don't. You know, I got here late myself. I came rushing in from another area. But no,
We appreciate you joining us.
Sir?
We appreciate you joining us, because I know you had another issue going on today.
Wild ride earlier.
I appreciate you getting on.
I was getting on pretty quick.
Yeah.
No, sir, just that, and members of the committee, we'd like the opportunity to review those questions, and certainly we'll get back and answer every single one of those, including Mr. Pittman's addendums to those, and anything that y'all need. It is that we want to be you know, transparent here and talk about our shortcomings and our you know, things that we're doing right, and certainly the things we're doing wrong. And I don't mind at all, but I would like the opportunity to get with our you know, our educational team and go over these one by one, and we'll certainly report back to the committee or individually, or however y'all would like us to do it.
Thank you so much. And, you know, as I have said, since we started meeting in January, which is almost a year now, it's taken some time, and it still takes time. It's still taking a lot of time for this commission to really take shape in the fashion that we know it can, and to be the kind of commission that it was originally set out to be pursuant to the legislation. But this is not a commission that, certainly from my standpoint, is here to be adversarial towards OJJ. We can be a resource, but we also need to understand the challenges that you all are faced with, and that comes from having open and honest dialogue. So it is a commission that's here to be an accountability commission. That's what we're designed to do, but we can't do that without being able to have those honest, difficult conversations. So we need to know your challenges, so we can also be a tool to help you all. And that is the kind of relationship we're trying to develop. So thank you again, Mr. Summers, for joining us. And if no one else has any thoughts from the commission regarding those questions, can we have a motion that we will send those questions to the Office of Juvenile Justice?
So moved.
All right, moved by Mr. Pittman.
I second the motion.
Second by Ms. Denicola. Any discussion? Any objection? Okay. It is adopted. I do understand we have some parent testimony that we'd like to hear. And I'm not sure if that parent is on right now. I think it's Miss Lakima Smith. Is Miss Smith on? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Smith. Okay. All right, Miss Smith. I understand you'd like to share some thoughts with us today.
Yes, sir. I was trying to reach out. We did a community meeting yesterday. I was reaching out to people to come down to see the conditions in OJJ.
Can you
parent,
just tell us? Can you tell us where you're from?
I'm from Monroe, Louisiana.
Okay.
And I mean, it's a lot of things that are not being seen that needs to be seen by the legislative people. It's a lot of conditions in Swanson that are horrible. I mean, they have mold growing. I have a son in the system. So I mean, I'm getting calls from him telling me the conditions are not safe in there. It's a lot of abuse going on with the children in there. It's a lot that needs to be looked at. And we're asking for someone to come unannounced and try to get in that building and look.
And you specify unannounced. You and I hadn't had a chance to talk, but when you say unannounced as opposed to announced, is that suggesting that things are not the same? If we
Yes,
said
sir,
we were
it's
coming in
not.
advance?
Yes,
Can you-
sir, it's not. I mean, I have a son that's telling me a lot of things that's being done. And it's like when they bring people in of power, it changes they make things look a little different than what they actually are experiencing in there on a day-to-day basis.
So this is not the first time I've heard that. And one of the challenges that we all deal with from the policy making standpoint is when we hear things like this from the community, of members who have family members in, whether it's juvenile prison or adult detention, that when we speak to the officials, we get something different as
Yes,
opposed to
sir.
what we're hearing from
Yes, sir.
the community.
Yes, sir.
So are there any additional details or specific details you'd like to share with us in terms of what your son is? Your son is at Monroe right now? He's at Swanson?
Yeah, I can tell a couple. I mean, I really didn't want to go into total detail, but I mean, I do it.
Well, no, it's completely to you. It's your comfort level. It's your comfort
Yeah.
level. I don't feel like you
Okay,
have to
so
share anything you're
yeah,
not
my
comfortable.
son. Okay, so my son has been abused by guards several times in this where they left bruises. He has a black eye. He had a big scar on the top of his back, his forehead. He had a lot of things that happened while he was in custody. He's been there from 13 to 19 in Swanson Youth. He's had a lot of guard threats. They've said things to him that's inappropriate. They did things that's inappropriate. And as a parent, I've been trying to get in touch with people to do something about Swanson for over 6 years, and I have had no luck.
Thank you, Ms. Smith, just for being with us today. I'm just ask that you hold on just for a second. I think I saw Mr. Summers may have wanted to say a word. Okay.
Well, no, I don't know Ms. Smith, and like I said, I've only been here a little over a year. If you have a problem, I'm accessible. I can promise you that. I don't know how they've done it in the past, but I want to be accessible to every parent that we have. And all you have to do is give me a call, or off the record, you give me a phone number. I can promise you, ma'am, I'll give you a shout. I'll give you a call, and we'll work through whatever problem that you might have. And if I've got staff that are abusing any children, they won't be there long.
Yes, sir. I need to speak to someone off record about it because there's a lot going on.
I'm here.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Bill, I have a follow-up question, and this is so we hear these stories quite often, and that's and we shouldn't ever hear them because each time we hear a story like this, it's deeply troubling. My question is, have there been any instances of discipline? Have there been any when I say discipline, I mean discipline in a guard. If there's been misconduct by a guard in a juvenile facility, have you all had to step in to conduct any discipline? Have there been any firings? Can you speak to that? Because I hear a lot about stories that Ms. Smith talks about, and I want to hear from OJJ's standpoint. You may not know specifically about what may have happened with her son, but are there any other instances that you're aware of?
Yes, I mean, not getting into a full blown, HR. We have discipline issues, throughout. I mean, it's just like any other agency that you might have, or any other facility that you might have, or there's always going to be something going on somewhere.
But I'm not, these are not one-offs. It seems pretty rampant.
Yes, sir. It is daily.
Well, if that's happening, I don't know about it. I mean, I really don't.
Exactly.
It has not reached my ears that if we're having this type of issues that are going on, I mean, I've got all kinds of supervisors and facility directors and whatnot. I'm sure somebody can tell me that.
I've tried to talk to the director several times about this issue. It's been told they'll call me back. I've never get called back. So I talked to OJJ supervisor. No one's never calling me back. It's like it's just being wiped under the rug.
So Ms. Smith, I'm gonna just intervene and say we have Mr. Summers' commitment that you will be hearing, or at least offline, and he's gonna be looking into this. But we know you speak probably for more families, than
Yes, sir.
than just your
Yes,
own.
sir.
So Mr. Summers, someone from his office is gonna be contacting you, and
That's
you'll be
fine.
able to keep us abreast of how those conversations go as we try to get, y'all can kind of work into the real details of what may be happening with your son, because that shouldn't be happening if he's being abused in any way. So
To
thank you,
add on-
Bill, for looking into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add on to that, Representative Duplessis and Ms. Smith, is that I've made it a point since I've been here is to meet with all kinds of parents that it might be disgruntled with the treatment or what they see is going on. And I don't mind this at all. This is part of my job. My job is to make sure that your son and any other youth that's out there is treated with respect and dignity. And that's the way the only way I know how to do things. And I will meet with you, Ms. Smith, and I will come up to Monroe.
Thank
To
you.
talk to you. Yes, ma'am. I
Thank
don't have, this is my job.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today, Ms.
Yeah,
Smith.
Ms.
Do you
Smith,
have
I'll make
anything
sure
else
to
you'd
make
like
the
say?
connections. Yeah, I was just saying, I'll make sure to make the connections so that you can communicate with Mr. Summers.
Thank you.
May I ask a
Thank you.
question, Representative Duplessis? Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, yeah,
Mr.
absolutely.
Summers, for a parent like Ms. Smith, what is the most effective way that she can get something like this addressed? I mean, to whom does she reach out to? I mean, is it calling the director at the specific facility? I mean, what's the process? What should a parent do?
I think Beth Touchette Morgan is kind of our executive case management officer, and she handles all the parental complaints, and so her name is out on the website, and I believe in her contact number, and her office is right next to mine, and this happens a lot, and if they just reach out to Beth, through I think it's a hotline, is that right, Beth?
Right. And my cell number's in the chat. I just put it in there for anybody that's on this call. And we have two levels, just Ms. Denicola, just so you know. We have a level within the facility where both youth and parents can call and talk to a family liaison that is a non-direct care staff in each facility. If that is does not resolve their issue, then they can call a 1-800 number that is listed on our website. And I'm sorry, I can't get there because I got the screen going and I'm going to lose y'all. I'm not that smart. That comes directly up to central office, that is answered by one of my staff that we basically circle up on. We also have an investigative hotline. The investigative hotline is another 1-800 number where PREA reporting and/or abuse or neglect can be reported. So that goes straight to the investigative staff here that's located at central office. It doesn't go to anybody at the facility directly, and that they would initiate the investigations that Mr. Summers was talking about. When we do issue discipline, we of course have to have some type of investigation or some type of thing behind it. So those are the three of the options that are right off the bat that are not related to the director or the group leader or counselor that you can also call to try to work with.
Thank you.
Do we need to maybe put forward some sort of motion? I think Ms. Smith was stating that there should be some way that commission members can do emergency visits. I mean, is there something that we can discuss to kind of put together to make that able to happen?
Well, we can certainly have the discussion, but when you say make emergency visits, I'm not sure all of the logistics that go into coordinating something like that when you have members who are across the state. So
Right.
You and I, we live in New Orleans. I'm not sure what an emergency visit looks like if we get a call or we hear something. I don't know if we're talking about members of this commission or who actually makes an emergency. I don't know how those are coordinated. So we can certainly have the conversation, but I would actually need to be educated as it relates to what an emergency visit even entails.
Right,
So I'm fine with having the conversation.
right. Are other members interested in having that conversation? Or even investigating if that's possible? Are other members interested in making some of the emergency visits? Or in unannounced visits as per the statement? Because then some of us are located in different, I mean, some folks are located in different areas in Baton Rouge or in other areas.
I mean, I think this is just my personal opinion. I mean, I obviously I think there could be some value to it clearly. But also looking at it from, I can only assume from OJJ's standpoint, I mean, we are talking about a secure facility. And so I'm sure it entails, and I'm hearkening back to my days when I was an assistant attorney general at the AG's office, and we had to schedule visits to go on to go to Angola, to go to secure facilities, because I mean, there are certain steps involved. So I would think in order to go down that path, you've got to first really have the communications with OJJ. What does that look like? What does that entail? I mean, how procedurally, how could you get that done? I mean, and because I can't speak for them from a security standpoint. And again, you know, I hear what Ms. Smith is saying, and there may be value in looking into doing something like that, but understanding on the flip side from OJJ's standpoint, surely there's got to be some security issues from their standpoint that they have to factor in as well.
Yeah, okay. I'm happy to talk to Mr. Summers about it, and even scheduling the visits, because I remember when we made the visit to, which facility? We went to Bridge City the last time.
Yeah.
And members thought that that was really helpful. Maybe we can just have some scheduled visits throughout the year where members who are interested in making the trip can go ahead and do that. But if you all think it makes sense, I'm happy to speak to Mr. Summers about both options and bring something back to the commission.
And it would be my thought, this is just my thought, that, you know, OJJ and the leadership, you all want to know, you know, like when y'all go, I don't know if that's something that's already in y'all's procedures and something that y'all do. Do y'all make, you know, emergency or pop-up visits to see who's doing what? So that you, Mr. Summers, are getting a clear picture of what's actually going on, versus they know Mr. Summers is coming, and you know we need to get our act together so that they see this is how it looks to OJJ leadership.
I do. I can assure you that I show up unannounced.
Yeah.
You know, and did so just a little bit ago. So somewhere.
Mm-hmm. But that's just something that you do. It's not like part of like the standard procedure.
It's just part of my nature.
Okay. Well, I think it should definitely be something where, you know, they know at any time they can get a, you know, emergency visit. Because to me, if you know that you can get, that there can be an emergency visit, whether it's from members of this commission or or leadership within OJJ, then you're more likely to conduct things in a way where you, at any time, you know, you could be seen. So you want things to be conducted in a way where you can never be, you know, below standards. So let's keep having that conversation, Gina, about the commission's role in these emergency visits. I just have questions about the logistics of it and how that works, but I definitely think it's a good idea.
Okay, I'll definitely look into best practices around what's happening across the country,
Yeah.
and speak with Mrs. Summers about best practices as well.
But I think it's a good idea.
Thank you all for that. So next up is the discussion around the work plan. Did members have an opportunity to put their eyes on it? I know it's a lot of information, but it's pretty much information that we have discussed previously. Did folks have an opportunity to review it and just sort of look at it? Or do you all need me to share my screen? I didn't want to take a lot of time on it.
Feel free
Unless
to
people,
share your screen, Gina. I think that'll
okay,
be good.
unless people had specific questions, but it's definitely a lot to go through. So I don't plan on going through every parts of it, but just kind of wanted to let folks know again where this comes from. Members who attended the October meeting may remember that we had a presentation from the folks from the Tau Youth Justice Initiative out of the University of New Haven. And so they are doing very similar work, like coordinating their systems to do juvenile justice reform. And I think most folks that I feel like I met and talked to pretty much everyone and gave folks different tools. We put together a coloring book that I shared with folks to share information on the commission and what was the purpose and how it's expected the legislation was to run. So I put together a work plan, taking all of the objectives from the statute. In addition, going back and looking at some of the other strategic plans, such as for OJJ and Department of Education, and where a lot of their strategies aligned, added information here. And I think what's really important is exactly what Representative Duplessis stated earlier, like the intent of this commission is really just to provide support, help coordinate, and figure out like the accountability mechanisms. So I divided the work into the subcommittees, right? As per the legislation. So we have prevention and early intervention subcommittee, an education subcommittee, the incarceration subcommittee, data collection, and then work that the JJRAIC is supposed to perform. And again, this is really about like working with the systems who are already doing the work and collaborating and consolidating where is possible. And so it's not really, none of this is about replacing, because a lot of the systems are already doing the work, but how do we understand what's happening, be able to provide the support and evaluate it, right? So the suggestion was, as we worked with the Tau Institute, was the leads would be folks who are already the systems folks doing the work. So for instance, in the prevention, these are some of the leads. It could be myself, the Children's Cabinet Executive Director, a representative from the DCSF, someone from LHC and the homelessness representation and foster care. These are folks that are already doing the work on the front end of the system. I'm a member of the Children's Cabinet Advisory Committee, and the idea would be that each of the committees would be led by these folks. Every committee would have an evaluator and a facilitator so that we can take notes, we can record and document. And so that every quarter when we come back to these meetings, we are able to do similar to what we're doing today. People would make their presentation on what they have found. We would praise and be excited about the work that's happening, and it's happening really well, and our young people are thriving. And groups would share, similar to what Mrs. Summers said, like there are things that are not going so well, and where folks do need, systems do need some assistance. Maybe we need to coordinate budgets better, right? And those conversations would happen in the subcommittees, and then recommendations would then be brought to this full body so that we could provide support and make recommendations and vote on movements that may need to happen for the next legislative session. So that is really the idea of the subcommittees and the work. And again, there is nothing that I made up on any of the, the objectives. Folks can, go back if they have time, or I'm happy to go through it with anyone, but all of the objectives come directly from the statutes, or where you see something may have come from the Department of Education strategic plan. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, thoughts?
I don't have any questions, but I just do have a thought that, this work is really, really challenging. And trying to get a handle on this is not easy. And without some structure, or without some, subcommittees or defined roles in this process, we'll be right back here a year from now having the same conversations. So I do think that providing some structure here is key, and certainly open to the thoughts of other members of the commission. Bill, did you have something?
Representative Plessis, yes, I'm sorry, I'm not being a member of the committee, but what we'd like to do is also be part of that first group, because as we try to move OJJ from just being on the back end of the system, of just having probation and parole and secure care sites, we certainly want to be involved with diversion, and we want to be on the front end before they get to the back end. So Gina, if you could include us, not as maybe as a lead, or just include us in the meetings, we'd love to be able to sit there and chime in and help wherever we could.
Well, thank you very much, because actually I forgot to say that. That was a very critical part. So the leads are the folks that are like the systems folks that are already doing the work. So for instance, and again, you see that the education is a Department of Education representative and an OJJ representative, because that is what the legislation stated in regards to this Education and Juvenile Justice Partnership Act. The incarceration place is definitely OJJ representation, law enforcement, mental health. All the meetings are then open to any stakeholders to participate, right, and figure out how to get the work done. So definitely members of the commission should participate, and honestly, you're 100% correct. Like, all of us should be moving through the different meetings. And if we can collaborate and get it situated that, they might happen on the same day, we may be able to move, we do need to be in the different spaces, because in order for this to work, we need the input from every entity, right? And so like you're saying, Bill, we definitely need to be working on prevention. And what I found that sometimes happens, because I'm on several state bodies, that we go in one area and we're talking about stuff, but it never really gets to another area of work, right? So a lot of the stuff is happening already. This is just a matter of, and I find it useful personally, that when I'm in some sort of meeting, I'm like, well, that's actually happening here, and I've heard them talk about it. And so we're not trying to create more work, we're trying to coordinate all of the things that are happening. So like Representative Duplessis said, that it's mind-boggling. And I know personally, I'm always struck by being in so many spaces that are then disconnected to the larger conversation, right? And so if, as a state, the vision and the value is that we are really trying to move from incarceration, reduce recidivism, create a better educational system, and create a better continuum of care, then we need to all have access to the information, and it's not in one space and then someone else don't really know about it. Even the funding and the funding streams, right? Like, how do we connect the state work to the community? And how do we get the money that might flow at the state tables actually down into the communities, which is why then the children, youth, and planning boards are a very crucial piece of ensuring that this implementation actually happens. So the ask is, that we can move forward with this plan and go and speak to all the different leads to make sure that they're okay with, this process, and that they'd be willing to meet on a regular basis and coordinate the work that's happening in their area of work.
Who's going to be leading the administrative piece? Is it going to be you? I mean, who's going to be coordinating this?
Well, so far I've been coordinating, but I've been in conversation with, again, I'm glad you asked that question, with Professor Woods in Southern University to provide some coordination and support. It seems that their law clinic is interested. I was hoping to get some feedback from Professor Woods, but in the meantime, again, I've just kind of put this together. But I'm happy to work with any entity that wants to, get to full implementation around the coordination and consolidation of the work. And we can literally, I don't know if folks have looked at the JJRAIC and the powers and duties we have, but we can literally cause to make surveys and get entities really involved in this. So I'm really open to any and all feedback from members on how to make sure we can really work this plan.
Thanks, Gina.
So is there a motion to accept the plan and be able to move forward on contacting all of the leads to ask and get their input on taking this on? Again, if something might be happening already and we would kind of work with what is already there. It's not about necessarily creating anything new.
So is the plan to have subcommittees for early intervention, subcommittee for education, incarceration, and data collection?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And then
I see listed leads on those subcommittees, but who would be the members of those subcommittees?
Yeah, as we mentioned, it's folks can folks can attend and participate. What we want to have is other advocate groups that are interested in this work. Again, something may already be happening, because I know in the education arena, a lot of what is on the legislation is happening with the Advisory Council on Student Discipline and Behavior, right? And so it's a matter of working with the leads, would see what's already happening that can fulfill, so we might not have to do and have additional meetings. We just need to make sure the work is happening. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah, and then the leads, working with the leads, we would look at each of the objectives and invite folks to participate. These are all going to be open meetings. So all the folks that are on this call, if they're interested in any in getting involved in any of the work or know the work that's already happening, that we can. So it's really about coordinating it again, and also understanding the outcomes and where we may need to provide additional support. We may need to change some laws or all of those things, if that makes sense.
I don't see anything on here that looks like it's particularly directed towards due process or courts or anything of that nature.
The incarceration area, and and again, like we have the Secure Care Task Force that's working on different things. We had the other resolution, and I'm sorry that it escapes me at this moment, in regards to that we discussed in the past, and it's definitely a part of all of the objectives that are here. And if we're in, so let's just say in incarceration, that something is missing, then we should discuss it and
Okay.
it'll fit in one of these objectives, I believe.
Okay,
And if we need to add something, we can add it, but it'll still be under that subcommittee opposed to creating like a new task force,
Okay.
right?
all right.
Gina, thank you for taking lead on this. I think you're certainly welcome to make a motion if you like.
Yeah, so the motion to accept the plan and I believe I'm doing this correct, and speak to the tentative leads about taking this on. And yeah, that's the motion. I believe.
Seconded.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Any objection? All right, the motion is adopted. Thank you for your leadership on this, Gene. I think this will be a crucial element to this commission's long-term effectiveness. If we're going to be effective at all, just by giving us that level of structure and giving us leads to carry out this in a more coordinated and deliberative manner. So I think this is very important. But I also think having that administrative support, if it's going to be Southern law, whomever, is going to be crucial as well, because that's keeping all this together is going to be the big part. We can only do so much, the members of this commission. So that's key. So thank you for that. The next piece on the agenda are a few other matters that I believe will require a vote. We've already talked about the work plan, but going back to the issue of just overall coordination, we had our first meeting in January, so we're now up on that first year. As we go forward, it is probably best if we all know that we are going to be meeting on, or at least striving to meet on a certain date and time 4 times out of the year. So we're proposing the idea of meeting quarterly on the second Friday of the year from 1 to 3. That'd be in March, June, September, and December. Why Friday? Well, the last 2 meetings have, whether it was by coincidence or not, have fallen on a Friday. Sometimes Fridays aren't good for people, which we certainly understand. And we're open to discussing any alternative dates. But just to give us some sense of structure, we're not locked into these dates, but just would propose, so we already have them on our calendars, that we meet quarterly on the second Friday of the respective months in March, June, September, and December at 1 p.m. So that is something we'd also like to propose. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
It says second Friday of the year. Do you mean the month?
It says year, but it should say month.
Okay.
Yeah. Should say month. So.
Sorry.
I'm sorry?
No, I was just saying, sorry, that was a typo.
Okay. Yeah, so.
I will only say that I have a standing meeting every second Friday of the month at 3 o'clock. So
that gives us a hard stop.
That's been in place for like 7 years.
Yeah.
So I'm going to need to be off of it promptly.
That's good. I think we should be able to take care of our business in 2 hours, hopefully. But unless there's any objection, do we have a motion? Or should I ask for a motion before an objection?
So moved.
All right, it's been moved.
A second.
It's seconded by Ms. Denicola. Any objection? Motion has been adopted. And lastly, before we get to public comments, we had some conversations on our last meeting regarding the response by the Juvenile Justice Center in Orleans Juvenile Justice Intervention Center in Orleans during Hurricane Ida and some of the challenges they faced and the decisions that they made during that process. We had some in-depth conversations both offline and during the meeting, and how troubling it was when we learned that the juvenile detainees were housed at an adult prison. And, you know, various reasons were cited. There were different positions as to whether or not it was justifiable. But there has been some discussion around policies and ways in which we can try to improve that, because we were told by local Orleans officials that they were having some trouble getting support from other juvenile detention centers in other parts of the state. And that in and of itself is very concerning. So I don't know if everyone on the commission has been provided with the agenda items or suggested language for proposed policy recommendations, but this would be around hurricane preparedness. And this would be to add some language. We would support adding language, statutory language, that's in state law right now, and also to the children's code around what should take place during times of emergencies for evacuations. And I'm happy to go through those and read each of them, but these would be proposed policy recommendations around hurricane preparedness. And we can discuss them. But what I will do is just, you know, Gina, it may be easier if we pulled them up on the screen like we did last time. Are you able to do that?
Yeah, give me a second.
Rather than me just read them.
Give me 1 second.
And this will be our last agenda item before we go to public comment.
Who developed these? Who developed these proposals?
I worked with various members and organizations who were concerned about these issues. So different advocacy groups worked with us to put it together. So can you see it on the screen?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So everybody should be able to see on their screen the first suggestion. This would be a change to revised statute 7521, which goes into detail about what the emergency preparedness plan should cover as it relates to agreements with other agencies or departments in section B2. The recommendation at this time would be to add language that says, in accordance with Article 822 of the Children's Code, that detention centers shall work with and accept children from evacuated facilities as needed. Now, the as needed language is certainly, there's room for interpretation there, which could, you know, from a legal standpoint, you know, there's room for interpretation. But when you say as needed, my definition of as needed could be different from your definition of as needed. So that's one thing that stood out to me. But I'm just reading them as they have been presented. Next, as it relates to notification to families, we heard from families that they did not know where their children had been sent, and that is again concerning. We also heard that there was a reason that people said that I don't know if it was for safety reasons why they couldn't tell families or parents. I don't know what those safety reasons would have been, but I'm not I don't work in juvenile corrections. But this language would be to add language that says notified families of their children's whereabouts once they have been safely evacuated and upon their return. Now, my thinking is that once they have arrived at the destination, that should be the immediate time when families are notified. If you don't want to tell them, if we, for safety reasons, can't tell them in advance, that's one thing. But there should at least be some requirement that once the children make it there, or that the families are notified. That's the second. Next, additional language around notification to families that their evacuation of youth to safe or sheltered areas. Evacuation plans shall, I'm sorry, this is not dealing with notification to families. We just moved on from that. This is around safe and sheltered areas. The plan shall include procedures for addressing both planned and unplanned evacuations into alternate locations in close proximity of the facility, as well as long distance evacuations. So under that provision, we would add that evacuation plan shall be in compliance with Article 822 of the Children's Code to ensure that youth are not held in adult jail or lockup. My read of this is that this further clarifies what we already understand to be state law, that children should not be held in adult jails. Seems pretty straightforward to me, but obviously we're gonna open this up for some further discussion. Regarding section B9, this would be new language saying that there'll be a development of protocols and agreements with local juvenile court to release as many youth as possible to families during evacuation. Now, again, when you have that as possible language, there's some vagueness there, there's some ambiguity there, and there's a lot of room for interpretation in terms of what that actually means when you say as many as possible. So I could see some issues there. But section B10 recommendation read as follows: assessment of disaster-related mental health needs of youth and plans and protocols to meet those needs, and having a central point of contact to have the information regarding evacuation. So that's some language that's been proposed that Gina has worked with advocacy groups to try to shore up some of the shortfalls and shortcomings that we experienced during Hurricane Ida. We will have storms in the future. We will have disasters in the future. And there should not be any questions of issues like we had during Ida going forward. There just shouldn't be. And I don't mean to trivialize it, nor do I mean to minimize the challenges that detention leaders face in these moments, but we should at least have a very clear plan on where the kids are going. Families should be notified, and we shouldn't be housing them with or even near adults. So there's just some things that we should just be clear on, and I'm hoping that this language can help us get there. So with that, I want to open it up to any thoughts or questions members of the commission have.
I just wanted to add to, in addition, some of the language, especially the last two recommendations, were taken from the National OJJDP best practices documents.
I would want, this would not be, I suppose, in the detention standards, but I would want to see a reporting requirement. Someone at some state level agency should be informed when there's an emergency evacuation, how many children were affected and where they have gone, so that we can keep track of these kids when they are not in their home jurisdiction any longer, when they've been moved out of it. And I don't know the exact mechanism for how that should be implemented, but I think that is an important thing that we need to include as part of our recommendations.
Great point. Okay.
Sounds great. I'll make sure to add that as well.
That might have to be a legislative change. I don't know.
Right. I think in addition to this, there was a conversation that we had in regards to whether or not DCFS was the appropriate place for this to still live. And I think the majority of the folks felt like, yes, it still should live there. Like it definitely shouldn't go under OJJ to take care of. And so even if there was some training for the DCFS folks, then that should happen as well. And it would seem that the report you're referring to, Richard, should actually go to them as well.
That would seem logical, yes. But there could be other logical destinations for that report.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think we should get a copy of the report as well. So if there's no conversation, should we, is there a motion?
Yeah, let's. Do you make a motion? Or is that Mr. Pittman?
I will make that motion.
All right, all right. And Gina, you second?
Sure.
All right. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, or is there any objection? All right, hearing none, we will adopt that. We will adopt that motion and make those policy recommendations. And I think that's going to be a good thing, given what we just experienced. So thank you for your work on that. Let's open it up to public comments. I'm going to give Bill Summers an opportunity to share some news with us, and then we will go to Ms. Gassert afterwards, who wanted to speak on an earlier matter and maybe some other things. But we'll start with Mr. Summers and OJJ.
Well, thank you, Representative Plesser. We just wanted to make a kind of a quick announcement in regards to a grant we received. We received several grants here over the last couple of months. One of them is a girls group grant for about $455,000 that we'll be working with our girls in the Natchitoches area and at the Ware Center as well. On a girls group for some implementation that we have, and in regards to it's a gender grant. The second one being a $500,000 grant for PREA that we are very excited about, that we'll be able to retrain some folks in regards to PREA that we have, and the big one is the $1 million grant that we had from OJGDP. Through the RFK Center in regards to juvenile justice reform. I'm very excited about that one, and that's really going to kind of give us a blueprint of where we need to go in the future. It's going to take on secure care, it's going to take on probation and parole. It'll also touch on the front end of the system, where I'd like to be able to take us in the future. Very excited about all three of those. Those grants, our staff has worked hard on getting those, and I really believe that's going to be a little bit of a game changer and a blueprint and how we're going forward. So I'll stop right there, and I would, if I could say just a public comment on the last piece of legislation, or the last piece of that you talked about, and Richard said it a little bit. I think that coming from the local world in regards to hurricane evaluation or evacuations, we always had reciprocal agreements with places that we wanted to go. I mean, if we had a storm, coming to the Lake Charles area, I had an agreement with Lafayette. I had an agreement with Roy Junkner in Jefferson, and I've had an agreement with Clay Walker and Caddo. So we made these agreements, bounding, and if they needed as well. And I just think that it might be a little bit of an overreach to tell local detention centers that they have to take somebody. And when that word says shall, it means shall. And I don't, it's not my place, because, I'm certainly just a, guy here on this thing, but I just like to say that, that the local detention centers might say no, and there might be some pushback on that. But anyways, on the other things, we're very excited about those grants that we received.
Thank you, Bill, and congrats on the grant. And we look forward to some good things to come from that. So that's a good deal. And listen, it is your place, and we appreciate that perspective, and we want you to share it. And the truth is that these proposals were only done in response to what occurred.
Right.
So for whether it was Calcasieu, who had an agreement with Caddo, that's fantastic. Those things should be in place. But it's very concerning when you hear from someone who's running a local detention center who's saying that they felt like they were not getting that same reciprocation. that they weren't getting the same thing that Calcasieu might have been getting. So, and there could be a list of reasons as to why that is. I don't know those reasons. Maybe it's a capacity issue. Maybe it's not a capacity issue,
Right.
but it's an issue.
Yes, sir.
And that's the deal. So we don't want to have these kind of conversations. You know, we want JJRAIC in Orleans, when a storm comes, for them to know that there's going to be another juvenile detention facility that they can bring those children to. So I understand your point. I receive it, but you know, and there probably will be some folks who want to, say that they have a problem with us proposing this language. This is just a recommendation,
Yes, sir.
and we're going to see where it goes from here. But I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Thank you. Next, Ms. Gasser, would you still like to speak?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to make a comment about the discussion regarding conditions of confinement. And so I wanted to, say, like, I think it's a great idea for the commission members to visit the facilities, whether that's announced or unannounced. But I did want to make a comment at a more systemic level about that issue, which is something that I've brought to this commission before, is just the problem that there is no independent body that is explicitly responsible for the oversight of OJJ's secure facilities, that has where there's an expectation that they'll be conducting regular audits of the facilities, or that even has the ability to shut down the facilities if there's significant problems. And, kind of along the lines of what we're just discussing, we discussed at the last meeting, this is something that exists for the detention centers. DCFS has a licensing authority over the detention centers. They all have to be licensed. They have to meet strict criteria, the detention center standards we were just talking about adjusting. They have to meet that strict criteria to get a license, and they have regular announced and unannounced visits where the DCFS, investigators will do those audits to ensure that the facilities continue to meet those standards, and they can get their license revoked and have to shut down if they don't meet those standards. There are obviously, steps along the way before that happens, but that is something that can happen. And this is true for group homes, mental health facilities, pretty much every facility that could possibly house a child outside of their home, except for OJJ secure facilities. And that's really concerning to me. And it's been something that's been concerning, was concerning to the legislature. So that's why the legislature created the Task Force on Secure Care Standards and Auditing in 2017. That task force met for 2 years and worked very hard in collaboration with OJJ to develop a set of standards that OJJ facilities should have to meet and be evaluated on regularly. But despite that mandate from the legislature, those standards have never been adopted. The problem was that OJJ has said that they couldn't promulgate the standards without a certain amount of funding to be able to meet the standards. And the task force did work to adjust the standards a little bit to reduce the cost that OJJ would have to incur. So that lesser amount of money would be required. And we did reduce the amount of money that OJJ needed to be appropriated to about only $700,000, but it was never appropriated, and that those standards were never implemented. So while I think the commission visiting the facilities is great, should always happen. I think more people visiting facilities is always better. I would really like to see the work of the task force implemented. And that not only includes promulgating the standards, but also funding and implementing an oversight mechanism, which the task force recommended contracting with an organization that has expertise in juvenile corrections to come in and audit the facilities on a regular schedule and against the standards that we developed, and submit those reports to the commission, to this commission. I think that process needs to be implemented, separate and aside from whatever this commission decides to do with unannounced or announced visits, because we cannot rely on, what we currently have is the goodwill of a devoted deputy secretary, because as reported by the legislative auditor, OJJ did not even use its own quality assurance division to conduct quality assurance audits on its secure care facilities from 2010 through 2015. So they can simply suspend their own quality assurance system if they want to. And if they don't have someone like Mr. Summers going out to just surprise visit the facilities, who knows what's going on. You know, the legislative auditor has been a great resource to go in and do assessments of the facilities, but they have to be requested or they only happen once every 7 years. So there's just a great need for this to be mandated, frankly, and to be happening on a regular basis. And that's not going to stop, you know, an individual kid suffering from poor conditions of confinement, but it will at least ensure there's some process in place where an outside entity is regularly looking at these facilities with the eye of an expert and against a set of standards. The last thing that I want to say is I want to make sure it was not missed that Ms. Smith said her child had been in OJJ custody for 6 years, from the time he was 13 till now he's 19 and he's still in custody. And I find that absolutely shocking. That is a third of this child's life. And there's absolutely no reason that a child should be in a juvenile facility for 6 years when, first of all, we know how much harm these facilities cause, how disruptive they are in children's lives, and how they actually increase the likelihood that kids will reoffend. But moreover, there's research that shows that there is no added value of confinement beyond 3 months. And this child has been locked up for 6 years. If there's anything that we can do to improve conditions of confinement, it would be to identify kids who are in OJJ custody right now, who have been there far too long, and send them home. And to make sure that there are no more kids that are coming into OJJ with these extremely long sentences that all they do not make the public safer. They do not aid in rehabilitation. In fact, they have quite the opposite effect. And all they do is increase the number of kids that are going to be in the facility on a daily basis. And they make it much more difficult with that child ends up having a really hard time seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and it becomes more of a behavior challenge for the facility. So that's all I have to say, but I just wanted to make those points about that conversation. So thank you for allowing me that opportunity. And I'm just gonna put in the chat a document that references the research that I was citing.
Thank you, Ms. Gassard, and for all your advocacy work and your involvement on this issue. We really appreciate your thoughts. Did anyone have any questions for Ms. Gassard, any comments to all the points she made? Okay, thank you again. Okay, Gina.
I was just trying to wait for other folks if they had. I mean, thank you, Ms. Gass. I mean, that was a lot, and I'm glad that you reiterated in regards to the amount of time that Ms. Smith's son has been incarcerated. And so it just definitely begs the question in regards to how OJJ might be doing and working through step down. I mean, you said a bunch of stuff, and of course, I'm not going to remember it all, but I do think that those are the things that we need to be tackling in the small, the committees, right? And I was a part of the Secure Care Task Force, and it is really frustrating and sad that you give up years and years of sitting at tables, and then the recommendations don't, kind of fall through the cracks. So I don't know, Bill, you talked about it. I'm glad you brought up, because I had it somewhere that I wanted to. I mean, I had just learned about the grants that was received, and I was definitely shocked about that. So one, trying to figure out if there's, I feel like the commission should be able to support and vet some of those proposals that are going out, and wondering if any of that funding would then support some of the things that Rachel discussed. It takes me a while to figure out where things could go. So I don't know if this can happen, but it just popped in on the top of my head when, as Ms. Gasser was speaking about the Secure Care Task Force, and maybe those things are aligned. And then it just brought back to my remembrance about St. Martinville. We haven't talked about it directly today, but I know we talked about it the last time. And so I was curious if you could share with us, like, what process and what route did it take to get St. Martinville approved and open? Like, what was the process? Did DCSF go out and approve that detention center? Like, could you give us a little bit of information on that?
Sure, to talk a little bit about the grants first and to support Rachel's comments, those grants are not for secure care. I mean, not for those standards. I mean, that's not. No, we put it in the budget from what I understand in years past, and it has not been approved. That part, I think Rachel was telling when I first got here, it was $750,000 or so, but I don't think it's ever been approved within our budget. As far as St. Martinville is concerned, DCFS is not licensed. I mean, they don't license us like what Rachel was talking about. DCFS does not license secure care, long-term secure care. St. Martinville was born out of necessity, but DCFS was not involved.
And so I'm curious, like, I mean, what does one, okay, DCF doesn't have a role in that. Thank you for the clarification on that. So curious then who authorizes? I just don't understand what the process is to open a new facility. And then I was just kind of shocked that like it came to us through some parents and some other advocates, and we didn't hear, we as in the commission, not we as in Flick, didn't hear anything about that happening, and just wondering, how does that get approved?
St. Martinville is kind of, it was born from the transitional treatment unit at Swanson, Monroe. We had a unit called in the Cypress Dorm that housed these youth that were in what's called behavior intervention. There was a large-scale incident up there months ago where youth were hurt, staff were hurt, that the facility was uninhabitable. We moved those youth to a center, a detention center in Ware. From there, they tore it up. We did not have a place to put these youth. We looked long and hard. There was a facility up north that had adult offenders. We did not want to go that route. We looked for help from local detention centers, and we were turned down. Therefore, we found the facility in St. Martinville that was housing at that time, and the Secretary or Assistant Secretary Staggs on a line still, he can jump in, that there were adults in there, but they moved them out. We opened that place to put these youth that, quite frankly, we couldn't handle in a dormitory setting and didn't have a place to put them. As far as going through this committee, I did not. I reported to the governor's office in regards to putting some children there, and we moved those kids from Ware because they were problematic there as well. I guess the issues is that we have some youth in our care that are not therapy ready and are not wanting to go down the same path as others. And we don't have the facilities nor the manpower to hold them in those dormitory settings. And that's where St. Martinville was born. There is money that is out there to have a transitional treatment unit at Bridge City, at Swanson, and at ACY. money was moved from one budget or one line item to another. But I didn't do a very good job of getting it into new construction as opposed to refurbishing. So we couldn't use that money because it had to be in refurbishing money as opposed to new construction. So the goal would be is to move some of this money back into where we have a place at Bridge City that we can look at, but there's nowhere any of the other two facilities. So the goal is to have these treatment units at each facility where no kids are ever moved anywhere. Instead of moving them from BCCY to Swanson where it used to be, if a youth is problematic and they're a danger to themselves or staff or whomever, is that they stay right there wherever they are. And we just have to get those things built.
But yeah, this just seems like a definitely a longer conversation because I feel like maybe a lot of different things could have happened. I think one of them is definitely like what Ms. Gasser was saying about stepping some young people down. And then there's questions about staffing and even working in communities to provide and find those kind of treatment services. But I think these are the kinds of things that'll come up in the committees and we can help solve some of those. So I'm not going to belabor that. I'm going to need to marinate on that for a minute. But so I'll turn it back over to you, Representative Duplessis.
Thank you, Gina, and I do agree. There's a much more in-depth conversation that needs to be had, discussing that and trying to come up with a better formula. Bill, thank you for taking the time just to go in a little bit of detail on that, but I do look forward to having a more in-depth conversation as it relates to that particular issue, because I also heard a lot about as it relates to St. Martinville. So thank you. Is there any additional, Mr. Pittman, did you have something you want to share?
Yeah, on a matter that hasn't been addressed. OJJ is only a small part of the juvenile justice system, and we have about 10,000 cases a year come through the delinquency system, and only a few hundred of them end up in our secure care facilities. But something I am hearing anecdotal reports of from public defenders is of the children they represent who are accused of some kind of an offense or another, getting pushed out of their local schools and into alternative schools. And based on these reports, I think those schools are systematically violating, these reports are correct, RS 17416, which was very recently amended to try to make it harder to stop that, harder to do that. And one of the problems that these public defenders are observing, in addition to what they see as school boards willfully misinterpreting that statute or simply ignoring it, is that there's no systematic way to tell these school boards to cut it out. Each kid needs his own attorney and needs to advocate on his behalf directly. So if you do this to dozens of kids, the capacity that is out there for this kind of representation, for which there is no money to be had, it's only done by do-gooders trying to do good, and they only have so much capacity to do it. You can overwhelm that system very easily, and I think that is something that we're seeing, a bunch of kids being pushed out of their schools, and then really an inability to do anything about it on a one-to-one basis, and no system in place to monitor compliance with 416 globally. You're not allowed to speak that. Yeah, Shannon Christian in the chat makes a good point on that. So I think, one, that is an objective that Gina listed on her work plan is dealing with push outs to alternative schools. But I want to bring that more to the front of our agenda than it has been recently. And I want to alert people to that problem.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Go ahead. Somebody else saying something? I thought someone else was saying something. It's definitely something that really, has been happening for a very long time. It's a piece of that is being addressed in the Advisory Council on Student Behavior and Discipline. There was part of this juvenile justice reform, again, that created the Education and Juvenile Justice Partnership, but that at one point there were these master model plans that were supposed to help with some of the accountability. And so the conversations and the haggling that's happening at that level was, the interpretation was that the law only required them to develop that plan and do a reporting one time. And that happened, and that was like in 2006 or whatever. And so, pretty much like a whole lot of everything, it just kind of goes by the wayside. So, we're working on a pretty much a plan similar to this so that we can have more accountability, but we're hoping to change some of the language that's going to be being put forth to have those plans, and that every entity should have to complete this documentation. But I'd love to maybe hear more from you, Richard, on if you think that that would be a solution. Because from my experience, it just seems like the more we share and bring up issues, the more things kind of get rearranged so that a lot of the information never really reaches the surface. And the young people are, just kind of being suspended and expelled. And so the young people continue to be held at a higher standard than we hold our systems. And if the schools are hiding it and not documenting the information or changing the information so that it doesn't come to light, it just makes it really difficult. So I would love to hear more if you have some thoughts and solutions, because something we are working on is, again, to ensure that all the local districts have to complete this document on a yearly basis and then brought to the Department of Education and or Bessie. But we've gotten pushback there because it's been said that they don't have the capability to really just, decipher and go through all of the information. They don't have the manpower. So that means then the systems are not held accountable, and our young people are getting kicked out of school and ending up in, the prison, which goes backwards from what the reform was to do.
And you would hope that a little sunshine on the process would be a good disinfectant. That if they're, but I see from your face you were skeptical of that notion.
Was it? I'm sorry.
You're not particularly good at hiding your face, Jim.
I know. But yeah, I'm happy to hear from you, maybe, and so you can see what's happening at the advisory council level. And again, this is what makes this document hopefully helpful, because then we're able to bring over from the different entities what's going on so that we can all be aware of what's not working.
Well, there needs to be a way, I think, to approach it and to monitor it that's not strictly on a kid-by-kid basis, so that you can identify, oh, this is a place where they made a mistake on a kid. This is a place where they're making lots of mistakes, and they're not looking like mistakes anymore. They're looking like a plan. And what are we going to do about that?
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Excellent points in conversation for sure. One that we need to continue to have. So with that, is there anyone else who would like to share any thoughts? Anybody from the public who has any comments? Look, we appreciate it, and this is right on time because Richard has to hit his 3 o'clock. That's what we're gonna be. Richard's jump off knows we need to get our business done, and then everything else that can't be done in that time frame, we're gonna be following up in those subcommittees from the work group. So look, I really just want to thank everyone for your commitment to this issue around juvenile justice. I want to take a moment to just acknowledge a few people. We have with us Judge Quint Smith, who was elected not too long ago to serve as juvenile judge in Orleans Parish. We thank you for spending time with us this afternoon and listening into these issues. We know how much you care about these issues, and that's why you ran to be a juvenile court judge, and you were on the front line trying to find that balance between accountability and providing services that are much needed that they never got on the front end, right? And while they're going to be detained, getting those services. So we appreciate your commitment, Judge Smith. I don't know if you have any words you'd like to share, but just want to take a minute to acknowledge you.
Thank you very much, Representative. I too am grateful to have had an opportunity to sit and observe today. I think I have been requested to join and participate on the committee. I would be honored to do so. I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with a number of you and so many of the things that you discussed today up front and center with what I personally care about, but also what our court is committed to doing. The collaborative effort that I see this group pulling together is absolutely necessary in order for those of us on the bench to be able to achieve the type of success that we all want. I want to also publicly acknowledge Mr. Summers and note that we had a very fruitful conversation with him recently, and we too urged him to allow us to work collaboratively with OJJ to allow all of us to find the best interests and make the best decisions on behalf of our youth. I look forward to working with you. I look forward to engaging and providing whatever insight that I or the court may assist. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. And we appreciate it. And congrats to your son on being on that New York Times bestsellers list.
Thank you so much.
Still trying to get through his wonderful material, but thank you for all your leadership and all of your contributions. And I also want to take a moment to thank Dr. Negatu, who has brilliantly staffed this committee for the last year. Like most of the wonderful talent that we have on the legislative side, they move on naturally because they do such a great job. They get offered better opportunities. So want to first thank her for her wonderful, wonderful assistance. We would not have been able to pull this commission together the way that we were able to this past year without her support. I certainly was not capable and am not capable of doing that work. And she has provided such support to me and Gina. We really appreciate it. She's now going to be the implementation manager for the state's health assessment with the Department of Health. So just want to say once again, can't thank you enough and congratulate you as you transition to that new role. And also welcome Nate Wiggins, who has already just been a phenomenal assistance. He's also with the governor's office, and we look forward to working with you as we try to move this commission forward. So thank you, Nate, welcome, and we look forward to working with you.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited with working with y'all as well.
All right, so with that, wish everybody a great weekend, a wonderful holiday season. We look forward to connecting in the new year, and everybody stay safe, and thank you for your commitment to juvenile justice in Louisiana.
Thank you, Representative. And thank you, Ms. White.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.